Okay, so let me first start off with a bit of an apology for last week because I clearly did not have it together. I would just tell you that for me, teaching class is an opportunity for me to learn also, and so that when I take on a class, and as a person that has been in Scripture for a long time, it behooves me, my own personal study, to seek something deeper than maybe what I've gotten before, right? And so, the way my mind works is I conjure up questions, and oftentimes I'll have more questions than I'll have answers. And that's what last week kind of turned out to be, seemed to be like just a whole lot of questions. And I'll take care of him. And if you felt like we got nowhere, it's because I don't know that we didn't get anywhere. All right. I really began the study asking myself, what was the deal between Jonah and Nineveh? Okay? What was the deal between Jonah and Nineveh? And ultimately I said, was Jonah a racist in that Jonah just didn't want anything to do with those people? Okay? Or in fact, was Jonah so caught up in Jewish nationalism that he didn't think anybody needed God but the Jews? Okay? What was that all about? And that led just one question to another. So let me tell you how I want to start off today. I've got each of you, I've got all of you a personal question. Okay? I would like right now for you to hear a message from God. And the message from God, Ralph, I'm telling you, I'm God, I need you to go to North Korea and preach to those people. Okay? All right, Ray, I've got another place for you to go, all right?
That's it.
I want you to go in the northern portion of Nigeria. I want you to find the Boko Raton leader. Is it Boko Raton? Boko Haram. And I would like for you to preach to him, all right? I would like for you to go to Manchester. I'm sorry, okay? All right, now, all of you, I want you just to kind of make that assumption that God is asking you to go somewhere. Now, what would be your answer to him as a prophet? How would you answer that? What would your hesitation be? Ralph, would you have any hesitation at all?
Going to North Korea?
Yes, I want to know.
Shoot, yes.
What's your hesitation, Ralph? God just
They're
told you
going
to
to
do
kill
it.
me.
They're going to kill you. So you would have some real fear
Yeah, absolutely.
about going there, how those people might treat you.
They're not our friends.
They're not your friends. Okay, all right. But, Ralph, those people need the Lord.
Department approval to travel to North Korea.
Thank you very much for that. Totally extraneous. Don't need any more of that right now, all right? Whatever. Okay, what? I mean, what'd you say to that?
What? North Korea.
I said North Korea. I want to ask you, do you think that's a whole lot different than asking Jonah to go to Nineveh?
Well, at least the Ninevites knew something about God. The North Koreans don't have a clue.
Oh man, what a comment. That sounds, I don't know that oh boy, Ralph. That sounds racist.
But they're the only,
What?
let me get my words in the right order. Give me a minute. So, did the Ninevites only know about a God? Did they really know about the God? Because didn't they have a plethora of different gods that they worshipped, and so they may have known about God, but that's different than knowing the God, the only God.
Yes, yeah.
And so I think that North Korea knows about gods, plural. I mean, if nothing else from history or literature or whatever. So they have a concept, they just choose not to believe.
There's actually an underground church.
There is.
Sure there is.
Yes, there is.
Okay, just hold this conversation. That's a question I had for you. This first page is my work page. Right, I want to read you a couple things. Some of you are new to Jonah right now, and I'm just working this through here. Chapter 1, verse 2, mentioned Nineveh and its wickedness. And God says, go and preach against it. All right? In 1:8, there's some basic questions that are asked of Jonah by the people on the ship. Where did you come from? What's your country? From what people are you? In 1:9, he answers, I'm a Hebrew and I worship God. All right? The sailors have this conversion experience of sorts. All right? I mean, they actually wind up praying to God, Yahweh as they know him to be, and in fact ask for forgiveness because of what it is they're getting ready to do, which is throw this man that they don't know is innocent or not overboard. They're getting ready to murder a guy. Then Jonah, just before being vomited up by the whale, he makes this statement that I really want y'all to hang on to. Quote, those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Read that. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Because we're going to return to that. To me, that is a big verse. That's a verse that in going through this study initially, I totally missed it. All right? Just totally missed it. I read it. It sounded pretty good. I'm not sure it's not just the real hinge of this study. 3:1. The word of the Lord comes to Jonah a second time, and God, for the second time, gives him a command. On this occasion, go to Nineveh and proclaim the message I give you. 3:9. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. 3:10. God sees that they turn from their ways and he has compassion. 4:1. Jonah is greatly displeased and becomes angry because God is having compassion on these people. Jonah asks a question. Is this not what I said when I was still a prophet? I knew that you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents in sending calamity. And I put in parentheses, just how was it that Jonah knew that? Okay. How did Jonah know that? And then, quote, Jonah sits by himself and sulks, and he says, it's better for me to die than to live. Now, that's quite a statement, folks. But Jonah is so displeased that God is having compassion on this people that he says he would rather die than live. I'm not sure I believe him. He first says it's because God's forgiving these people, and then he says, basically, I'm sitting here suffering, I might as well die. Gives two reasons right there. Gives two reasons for God to zap him right there. And at the end is God makes a statement. He says, should I not be concerned about that great city? And I write, obviously Jonah was not. Why not? All right. Now, second page is some more questions. Let me, just for a moment, let me give you all a picture here. And look here, I don't want to, this today is not about how you read your Bible. I'm not doing that. But here's what I do want to say. I don't know that I believe Jonah was a real character. I don't know that. I just don't know that. I'm just telling you. When I read it, I don't read it and don't have to read it that way. What I would say is that whether it was real or not, I think one of the reasons it's here in Scripture is maybe for some people of Israel, a Jewish group of people, to read this, and maybe for them to recognize that Jonah represents who? Jonah represents Israel. Who said that? Yeah. Jonah represents Israel. So let me just for a moment, I'm going to give you a picture of the Old Testament. It's a big old view of the Old Testament, 20,000 feet. All right. In fact, it's a view of the whole entire Testament. So God creates, and as a part of that creation, He creates mankind. Mankind is different from the rest of creation because mankind has a special relationship with God. Okay? Very special relationship. Mankind breaks that relationship. Right? Mankind suffers sin. And so that relationship is hurt terribly. So God seeks to reconcile His creation and mankind back to Him. And He does that initially by choosing a people. And He chooses that people out of grace. Not because of anything those people did. He chooses them out of grace. And God's expectation is these people that He has chosen out of grace will respond to Him by giving grace and bringing reconciliation of His creation to Him. Y'all hear that? That's the whole story. That's the entire story right there. That's the story that we're involved in right now. You have been chosen not because of anything that you all did, not because of any great people that you all happen to be, not because you all know God, not because you live in America, not because of anything that you've done. You have been chosen by grace to give grace to the world, to bring reconciliation of God's creation to Him. You hear that? All right. And let me make a little bolder comment. The only reason that Israel was chosen in grace by God was for the purpose of reconciliation. The only reason Israel ever existed was to bring reconciliation of His creation back to Him. You hear that? Now, let's take another step forward. The only reason He has His church right now is to bring reconciliation. And the only reason that God, through His grace, has chosen you and continues to choose you by His mercy and compassion and forgiveness is in order that you all might participate in the reconciliation of God's creation back to Him. That's the only reason you're here. So I'll spill this and we'll get into it. I'll just ask you, right now, do you truly appreciate your election? Do you appreciate your chosenness? And if so, how are you living that out? Because I'd say to myself and to each one of you, if the only reason or if the only way you're living your life is to be your good moral self and to take care of your good moral self so that you can get yourselves to heaven, okay, then you have totally missed the point of why God has you here. What do you think? Is that pretty harsh? Is that hard? I think it is very, very hard, but I will tell you that it is so very easy as God's chosen people, as God's chosen people, which we are today, it's so very easy to feel so good about ourselves. To feel so good about the peace that I have that they don't. Really good. I feel great. Y'all want to chew on that just a little bit? Deuteronomy 10. 10:10. This is Moses talking. I, moreover, stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights like the first time. And the Lord listened to me that time also. The Lord was not willing to destroy you. Y'all know the context of this right here? It's the second time. This is past the golden calf. He's got the second set of tablets. Then the Lord said to me, arise, proceed on your journey ahead of the people, that they may go in and possess the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Now Israel, what does the Lord your God require from you? But to fear the Lord, to walk in all his ways and love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the Lord's commandments and his statutes, which I am commanding you today for your good. In other words, to emulate the Lord, to take on his personality, to have the compassion that he has, to have the mercy that he has, to have the wish to be a reconciler. 14. Behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven and the highest heavens, the earth and all that is in it. Yet on your fathers did the Lord set his affection to love them. And he chose their descendants after them, even you above all peoples, as it is this day. So circumcise your heart and stiffen your neck no longer. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great and the mighty and the awesome God, who does not show partiality nor take a bribe. He executes justice for the orphan and the widow and shows his love for the alien by giving him food and clothing. So show your love for the alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God, you shall serve him and cling to him, and you shall swear by his name. He is your praise, and he is your God, who has done these great and awesome things for you have, with which your eyes have seen. And basically, he recounts the story, their history, which we have a history. Jerry mentioned it this morning. Really wonderful, the comment about baptism. Your baptism is you're baptized into a history. You become a history. You too, right now, are Jonah. You too, right now, are Israel. You too, right now, are part of his church. And there's a reason that you are a part of it. And it's not because of you being so good. Most of you are. Most of you are. You're really, really good. But that goodness that you have is a response to the goodness that God has shown you. And when you recognize that goodness, and that's the point. So many of us don't recognize how good God has been to us. Sit down and we say, thank you, God. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm so at peace for what you've done for me. Thank you so much, God. And then you don't do anything. What kind of thankfulness is that? What is it? God's grace is always free, but it's never without expectation. And his expectation is you take on the character of God and you recognize that there are people out there that are estranged from him. And the only way they will ever know God is if you become God to them, or you become God's messenger to them. So you get out of your comfort zone. And Ralph, I'm not sure I'd go to North Korea either. It may take God personally talking to me. But I think if he did, I'd be afraid that whale was gonna get me too. You know? Yeah, Jan?
I'd like to share something with you. I don't know if you know this. It's about your son, Nathan, many years ago.
Huh.
It was before college. He could have been early college, but I think it was before he was college. Young man, high school. And the lesson that morning had been about turning our lives to God, deep in what God, and I remember him saying, we were talking a little bit about, and he was looking forward, he said, you know, sometimes I'm a little bit afraid to ask God to take charge of my life because I'm not sure what he's going to ask me to do.
Yeah,
And look where your Nathan is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't we, Jen, don't we all have that, don't we all have that problem?
Yeah.
You know, when I was studying this last night, and I was thinking, you know, the perspective so many of us have of this sort of Jonah passage, though, is for, you know, why should I not be in Africa? Why shouldn't I be in Ghana right now? Why shouldn't I be in North Korea? Or why, you know, all those things. But it occurred to me, even last night, the number of folks that I know that I have been so reluctant to share anything with. You know, I'll tell you something. I think we are more and more, as we've changed culturally as Middle Tennessee has changed. The greatest change that I have seen in Middle Tennessee among people is a reluctance to have relationship, a reluctance to share. In fact, it just bothers me to no end. Here in Tullahoma, it's my home, this is my home. And you walk by people in the grocery store and they act like they don't even see you. Okay, does that bother anybody other than me? It's like, are you a clown? Do you not see me? Say hi. So what is wrong with you? Can you not say hi? Can you not make eye contact? How's the weather? Very nice, whatever. But no, we have become so afraid that we walk around like we've got blinders on or something. And I think, honest to goodness, we're afraid sometimes to say hi to people or say anything to people. And I think that carries over to any number of other things. We're so afraid that when we say something to somebody that we're going to upset them somehow or another by what we've said, and that's their personal space, so we need to stay out of it. There are some of us that may have a problem with getting too much into other people's personal space.
I don't know anyone like that.
Don't look at anybody.
Hey, I'll accept some criticism for that. I sure will. Because I think sometimes you can be over the top a little bit, and you can really, maybe you say a little more than what you need to say, all right? But I tell you this, there's a whole lot more of you got a bigger problem with never saying anything to anybody that means anything. There's a whole lot more of you got a bigger problem with that. And I think it's a basic failure that so many of us have to recognize how important it is. You are a messenger of God, and you know, hey, when you see some people that aren't here, and you wonder, give them a call, ask them, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid? Well, what's going on? There's people that you see in the office or that you see in your workplace. You know they're not going to church anywhere. They don't have a clue. And I'm not telling you going to church is the answer. Okay, clearly it's not for a whole bunch of people. But I will tell you, it's a good start for a whole bunch of us. Okay, people that don't have any inkling of God in their life, you need to be able to say something. Okay, You need to be able to say something, not in a ugly kind of intrusive kind of way, but you can say things. Hey, guess what? We go to Cedar Lane. We got a pretty good family over there. How would you think about, hey, won't you visit us? How about our Christmas party? Would you come to our Christmas party? That ought to be pretty easy. Huh? But we have become so private. We've become so private with our life, so afraid to say things to anybody. We just don't want to do it. You know, we're not going to talk about religion or politics. Fine, talk about the party, okay? Talk about Santa Claus. Talk about it, but involve people in your life. Am I resonating with anybody here? Yeah, I mean, do you not see how, honest to goodness, man, it's hard for me to not be really biased about regional parts of our country. Because as a young person, I can remember going north, and I didn't see a whole lot of, I saw a whole lot of people with blinders.
Be careful what you say.
Okay, all right. Yes, well, God,
I would have waved at you.
well, I was going to say, Abraham told God, sure.
Thank you.
Can I just say, I think for my generation, a lot of the time, and this may be an excuse for avoiding the discomfort of certain types of conversations, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's busyness. I got through grocery shopping yesterday, and I got to the checkout, and I realized that I had been price comparing, and I'd been rushing. I was trying to get home. Paul was working on a project. I was trying to get home to help the kids and get dinner on. And I got through the checkout, and I was like, I did not make eye contact with a single person. And I usually do try. Like, I usually try to, but we rush. Like, we rush so much. And I think the only solution to that, really, there's a huge lack of intergenerational connection. You know, a lot of times what happens, I've been reading this book, what is that book called? Hold On to Your Kids. And it's about peer orientation primarily, and the importance of kids attaching to people, not only their parents, primarily their parents, but beyond that, you know, older generations and aunts and uncles, and having this community. And I think that we really, like, we don't think of it as a spiritual discipline to foster that, but it really is. We're not supposed to be, okay, we have the church of the parents of young kids. We have the church of the people whose kids are just growing up and moving off. We have the church of the people who are starting to have grandkids. We have the church, you know, like, it's not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be all together, and it's supposed to matter. If you see someone from church that is much older than you, like, you shouldn't be at a loss for their name. And I will confess that I have been. But it's really, really hard, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, but it's really hard for parents of young kids to be the primary ones reaching. It's always so refreshing when I'm going through the store, I'm somewhere in public, and someone who's older from church recognizes me and says hello first. Like, that's such a refreshment. I don't think y'all realize how much of an encouragement that is.
As an older parent, I'll tell you that for Margaret and I think so much of our parenting was not what we did as much as what our church did and that circle of friends that we had. And I will guarantee you, your kids get to be a teenage level, they're going to learn more from their classmates than they're going to learn from anybody. You just better count on them. So you better surround them with the right kind of folks. Surround them with the right kind of folks.
See, take what you just said.
Yeah.
And you go back to what Jerry said during the sermon, talking about the stats of depression,
Yeah.
isolation, loneliness.
Yes. Yes.
It all feeds each other. It feeds on itself. So how do you stop it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that means I got to get my face out of my phone while looking at the list, trying to ignore people, and I got to start telling people.
Yeah, before I get off of that, before we go to something else that you're going to, I will tell you a real struggle I think the younger generation has is purely inspired by electronics. There are too many of them that can tweet somebody but don't know how to talk to somebody, look at them in the face. And I would tell you, in teaching your kids, teach your kids to look at somebody in the eyes and talk. Because so many of them can't. And that is a very, very important thing to do. I just don't know. Maybe there's a lot of conversion that goes on over the internet. Okay, I don't know. I suspect a personal touch is the way to get things done. All right, go to your second page just for a moment. Here's some questions I had. So Jonah knows God is compassionate and merciful. Do you all agree with that? Jonah quotes that before, right? Jonah knows. Now, I meant to underline knows because I'm questioning just how much did Jonah know? You know, there's an old Jewish proverb. I made it up. If you got a shoebox with a snake in it, and you tell somebody it's got a snake in it, all right, they ain't gonna put their arm in there. All right. So you can say, I know there's a snake in there. If you want to know whether somebody believes there's a snake in there or not, they ain't gonna put their arm in there. All right. What I'm saying is, no means a lot of things to some people. No is always followed by doing.
But it also, his knowing goes back to 2 Kings 14.
Which is?
Which is where the Israelites are going to be invaded, they're going to be destroyed, and God sends word through Jonah that he hears the distress of Israel, and that he knows it, and he's going to restore their borders. And he sends it. So all this comes through Jonah. So Jonah has experienced the relief of that kind of distress.
Jonah has
So he
experienced it.
knows.
He
Yeah.
knows what?
So
What does Jonah know?
compassion.
Does
from
Jonah
God.
know that God's compassionate towards him and the Israelites? Or does Jonah know that God is compassionate to his creation? Does Jonah know God in that way?
I don't think so.
Huh? I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
I think he thinks he knows God,
Yes.
and he thinks he knows God through his own experiences. So he takes his experience, he takes his own understanding, and he projects that on God. Okay?
Don't we all?
So
Yes.
God, yes, we all do, and we've got to be careful about it. There's your lesson right there, okay? We got to be careful about having our own prejudices, our own biases, our own experiences, and projecting that all on God as if we somehow or another have got God figured out by our own limited access, right?
But don't we also use that phrase that we know God? In the same way that Jonah is saying that he knows God. It's the same. He's the same kind of human we are. Flawed.
Absolutely. He is flawed, and all of us are flawed too. We need to remind ourselves of
Yeah.
that, okay? When we say we know,
Sorry.
we got our limitations, don't we?
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood said it well.
Well, he knew that God was going to be compassionate toward Nineveh. And he makes that argument as to why he doesn't want to go. But knowing that about God, he doesn't like that about God, so he's not going to share in that with God.
I thought about that, Randy.
Okay.
I think you may be absolutely right. On the other hand, I am not sure. I'm not sure in my mind that he really, really believed that God was going to do such a thing. Which is why at the end of the book, he's sitting by himself wanting to die. Or he says he wants to die. I mean, in the end, I'm not sure he really believed it. And boy, we got a revelation right there. We got a
I
revelation.
think it like this though, Steve,
Yeah.
that he did know God. I mean, we do that too. We say, we know we can trust God, for example.
Yeah.
But yet, we try to help God out all the time. So I'm saying, I'm kind of equating it to that more than I am than what you're talking about. It's kind of, I know it's a fact, it's permanently in my head, but I don't live like it's really true.
There's another side of that too, Gerald, and that is knowing God. We know God, we know about his justice, and we know about his mercy. Are those two equal things? Is justice equal to mercy? And when I read the text, and go to this, the most quoted, what is the most quoted text in the whole Old Testament? Exodus 34:6. You got to read it. Exodus 34:6. Then the Lord passed by in front of him. in front of Moses, and proclaimed, the Lord God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness and truth. Now listen to this. I want you to compare justice and compassion right here. Just think about it. Who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, visiting the iniquity of fathers on the children and the grandchildren to the third and fourth generations. He keeps loving kindness, he keeps forgiveness for thousands. Yet, we got 3 generations that he'll show some justice for. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too much of a mathematician again, but I think the thousands outnumbers the 3 generations. Just a thought. How do we project our biases and our own discriminations on God? How do we do that? Don't everybody talk at once. How do we do that?
We create God in our own image.
We create God in our own image. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. What's the worthless idol?
I was going to say, do we try to rationalize
Sure.
about the people that we don't care about? I was thinking about the people in our world that I don't want to see justice. I mean, I would like to see justice for and
Yeah.
not forgiveness because of their abuse of children and women.
Sure.
And so I rationalize that God would punish them.
Get back to my question.
Well,
Get back to my question. Those who cling to worthless idols. What is the idol? Are you saying it's rationalization?
I'm just saying that, well, okay, I was projecting why I feel like God would be on my side when I think about those that I would like to see punished. I
What's
guess
the
that's what-
idolatry of that, Skip?
Here's a strange thought of putting this together is, I think Jonah knew God was capable of this. He was afraid that God would fulfill this. He was a prestigious individual in his community, or maybe even in Israel, in the whole Jewish nation. And he says the worthless idols was, and his wanting to die was, how am I going to go back to my people knowing that the people that are enemies have accepted God's graciousness and stuff? How would he live up to his self-image?
So his self-image might have been his idol?
idol.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Anybody else, some ideas? Yeah, Don?
Yeah, I guess one word comes to mind, and that's allegiance.
What?
Allegiance.
Allegiance, okay. So your idolatry might be your allegiance. Your allegiance is to something else.
Yes. and,
What is that else, Don?
It could be a lot of things. It could be your career, it could be wealth, it could be pursuits, hobbies, whatever you think brings value to your life, quality to your life, that sits on a higher plane than God.
Let me give you all a paraphrase of a great quote that I read by a great person that I don't remember. You read too much stuff and you don't write it down and you think, man, that was good, and then you can't remember, you don't even remember where you read it. But it goes something like this. When God when the God that you love, when the God that you obey agrees with everything that you think, then you have created an idol. You hear that? You know, hey, my God and I, we walk through the fields together. We walk and talk as good friends should do. We hold our hands. Our voices ring with laughter. My God and I. What's the last one? I don't remember. I first sang that with Pat Boone.
Go through the meadow.
Walk through the meadow.
I remember something like that.
Walk through the meadow.
Yeah.
All right, look. So I'm all about having a deep relationship with God. All about it. I think we all ought to pursue that. But just in the back of your heads, remember, if you never have any kind of disagreement with God, because you all are always just right on the same page, be careful that you haven't created your own God.
I think
Be
those
very
who-
careful. Yeah.
I think those who have the deepest relationship with God are likely to be the most okay with it when he does something unexpected. You know, they know that
Yeah.
he's not
Yeah.
always going to do what they want, and they can have peace. I mean, like the author of that hymn that lost his business, his son, and then his 4 daughters.
Yeah.
All back to back to back, and he was able
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
when peace like a river
Yeah.
attended my way, when sorrows like
Yeah.
billows roll.
Yeah, that was I want to say that was a beautiful story. I'm not sure that conveys what I want. I really appreciated what Mike had to say this morning and bringing that up in the context of peacefulness, because it's incredible, isn't it? And that's absolutely incredible. What you say is very, very true. I think some of our most mature faithfulness is recognizing some things when it don't go the way you planned it to go. It just doesn't go that way. That's God. We're okay with it. We're okay with it. Let me look at my notes here again. What worthless idol did Jonah hold on to? And I wrote self. He made God in his own image. And then I've got this note that I have no idea why I've got this. I am God's child. You are not. What am I thinking about that? God will save me. I'm not a sinner like them. My thoughts are your thoughts, projecting our bias and discrimination on God. I'm off right there on this idea that, again, I was asking last week in studying, which is the way that Jonah views Nineveh. The way that Jonah views Nineveh. And I'm asking because this is a little different than what y'all have said, okay? Which I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not telling you I got it and y'all don't. But I still wonder if from the get-go, Jonah's looking at Nineveh through incredibly racist, discriminating eyes in terms of what he wants to do for them and what he's willing to do for them.
I think Jonah saw a supremacy of Israel, and that was one of his idols. That he because Israel was God's chosen, he had turned that into an idol. And so then God was going to act, so everybody else was lesser. That meant they were expendable.
I kind of wonder though, at that moment in history, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but Nineveh and Assyria had the upper hand on Israel.
I don't know about Nineveh. I read a little bit about Nineveh last night. I read a little bit about Nineveh last night. I didn't have much time. There was a good game on. Oh, is it 11 o'clock yet? We're going to take off 5 minutes at 11 o'clock, see if Tennessee got in. No. Thank you. We have just been reported by somebody paying attention in class.
So wasn't Nineveh the capital of Assyria, or am I mistaken about that?
I know Nineveh was a commercial center, and I know that Nineveh was noted for its sinfulness. and the comment that the commentator made, which is what commentators do, is comment, was that it was just as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what he wrote. Okay, I don't know where he got that, but that's what I wrote.
So interpreting the author who wrote this stuff on the page, I think with the am I God's child, you are not. I think we often think of our salvation being for me and a person like me.
Yeah.
And even if we take it away from like the racism or a conversation my dad relayed about a coworker he was talking to has always stuck with me. They were talking about some serial killer or terrorist or something like that, and they were like, that person's terrible, they're can't be saved, and or maybe God has special grace for that person. But my coworker was relating to my dad's coworker. Yeah, I don't know why it matters who it was, but this guy was saying that basically he could be that terrible. He could be that axe murderer. He could be that terrorist if it wasn't for grace that God had given him to either put him in the situation that he was and save him.
Yeah.
And so I think this place we often draw a line that we're God's children. We're saved because of some sort of connection to whatever. And those people, they're different. Like there's something wrong there. They have an extra sin. They have something else that they are outside of God's grace. They're outside of the church. They're outside of humanity or something.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to think. How about this? It's just by matter of chance. I'm not agreeing with myself. I'm making a statement. Okay. It's just by matter of chance that most of you all were born in a good, warm Christian home with a socioeconomic situation that allows you to be here today, dressed nicely, with good incomes, and doing just fine in life. Just by chance.
And maybe it's because he knew we couldn't take anything else.
That may be, but maybe, is it possible? Is it possible that we have been chosen? Is it possible? Is it possible we have been chosen for such a day as this? And chosen for what? Yeah.
Well, it breaks my heart because as you introduce the class, would you go to North Korea? Randy and I are in Russia. I have some dear Christian brothers and sisters there, and because we are conditioned by political powers, I may never can get a visa stamped again to go there. And my dear sister Marina, she's lost 2 or 3 babies, and we were so close. And I keep in touch with her. And we are conditioned that because of whatever's happened in a political arena, we can't be close with those people anymore. God have grace and mercy on us that tear down walls and be gracious for one another and love one another. If they're in Moscow or Russia or Sosnovysk up in the Komi region, wherever they are, that we love one another and share that grace of God.
Thank you. So I want to be careful that I don't teach that you as individuals here are predestined to be here with such and such in mind. I don't know. I think I'm probably not there. I think that we're predestined as a people. I'm not sure I think we're predestined as individuals. That's a little hard for me. That's a little hard. That's a deep argument that's been present from John Calvin on and before him. Okay, so I'm not quite there. What I would tell you is, we do need to be cognizant that we are an incredibly blessed people. And having said that, do you not think that there's some pretty incredible expectations that God has of us? And I'll tell you folks, for me that's a little bit scary. I want to tell you something about myself, okay? So some of y'all are going to be shocked by this. But I have a high opinion of myself in terms of what it is that I know and what it is that I think Margaret and I as a family have gotten done. I feel pretty good about that. That scares me to death. Because with that, I wonder just what God's expectations of me truly are. And I'll tell you, sometimes I worry in the depths of my soul if I live up to that. Okay? I'll tell you, I think that ought to be pretty sobering for all of you. That ought to be pretty sobering for all of you. Look, a couple more passages that I want to hit. My favorite one, the Genesis 12 passage, is a passage, it's a passage to Abraham. It says, hey, I'm giving you all this, but I've got expectations that you'll be the blessing to the world. But then skip over with me. Go to 2 Corinthians 1, 3 through 4. 2 Corinthians 1. Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction, so that we will be able to comfort those who are in affliction, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Pretty unreal passage, isn't it? Y'all feel like y'all have been comforted? Then I just tell you, go out and comfort somebody. Okay? If you really believe it. If you really believe it. If you really believe it, you won't stick your hand in that box with that rattlesnake. If you really believe it, you won't sit by yourself. You won't walk through a grocery store like you've got blinders on and not pay attention to anybody. You won't ignore things and people that you know you can impact that you ought to be calling. Okay? You won't do that. Not if you know. Some of you won't ever figure it out. But if you know, y'all have a great week. Next week, no Jonah!